Hey guys, it's Max Convexity. Today I have a special guest. Sammy the Squirrel has joined us. We have Jackson as usual. Jackson is using the utmost of his self-control not to chase the squirrel, and I've admonished him several times that I'd beat him, spank him on the butt if he chased the squirrel. All right, guys, I got a good video planned out for you today. Kind of a cloudy, overcast day in Austin. All right. It's called Why SPYT. What the hell with SPYT? I wanted to make a video about SPYT. I've been meaning to do a video for a while looking at SPYT a little bit on a little bit deeper level. Um, all right. I got a request to do faster videos, and I sometimes have attention problems. I watch 5 minutes of a lot of videos and then turn on another video because I get bored. I know how that is. I'm sensitive to that. This video, though, however, I'm working on some short videos, but my next one will be like 15 minutes long or shorter. This one's not going to be that one. This one we're going to have to get in the option lab, and we're going to have to get our hands dirty a little bit on this one. All right. For the other thing, the one reason we're going to have to get our hands dirty is because we're going to have to compare it to other methods of doing similar things. JEPY is using daily options to pay a dividend. It's a very similar strategy. So we're going to plus it's the same company and everything. JEPY is a full overlay. So the JEPY method is where they use a cash secured put to pay the dividend. The thing about the cash secured put is the upside is totally capped with the way those options work. We're going to look at that in a second. The thing about this strategy is this is the most aggressive strategy as far as capturing yield goes. Jay's mentioned multiple times that yield max, he didn't say this about Defiance, but I think he means about the whole sector or about what his funds are doing. They're trying to maximize the yield capture so they can maximize the dividend they pay. Regardless of the consequences, even if it might cause other problems. And that's kind of why I started my channel to kind of address some of those. But JEPY has a full upside cap, but it pays about 3 times the dividend that SPYT does. So choices, we're getting more and more choices. Now, there's nothing wrong. Just because SPYT is not capped doesn't mean not capped is the only way to go. I'm not saying that SPYT's method is better than JEPY's. It's kind of an individual thing. They're basically the same thing. They really are the same thing. With just the only thing different is the dividend, but they're basically doing the same thing. There's tons of funds that are 100% capped, and they're great funds. Just because SPYT figured out how to uncap a covered call fund, it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. Um, I've always said JEPQ was if I had to put my money in any one of these, and I can only put it in one, I would put it in JEPQ probably. Maybe YMAX. I'm really liking the yield max, but probably JEPQ. JEPQ is probably a little safer bet because if it was all your money, if it's all the money I had and I could only go in one investment. Anyway, it's not necessarily a bad thing to be 100% capped. Okay, this is the first fund of its kind, though, because what it is, it's a covered call spread, and we're going to get into the options lab here in a second. But because it's a spread, it doesn't need to be covered. There's no such thing as a covered call spread. There's covered calls and there's call spreads. A call spread covers itself. All a call spread is on a call spread, when you sell a call spread, you're selling a call and then buying another call. The call that you sell is more expensive than the call that you buy because it's closer to being in the money. In any event, that it's a great trade. We're going to look at that here in a second. I will say, even though this is the first one of its kind, in the NEOS prospectus, SPY and Triple QI have it in their perspective where they can use call spreads also. They've mentioned more of like in a time of low volatility. And I saw somebody ask them the question, have you ever done this yet? and they haven't yet. So, but they can. But this is definitely the first. It's not the first fund that can do it, but it's the first fund I know of that's doing it on a regular basis. I think it's ingenious, by the way. That's the too long don't read. We'll get there in a second. All right, let's look here at here and let's build one of these things out. All right, or let's talk about risk and reward real quick. So here's long stock. This is the profit and loss graph of 100 shares of long SPX. There aren't really shares of SPX. It doesn't matter. It's just for theoretical purposes. So so what you would expect with long stock goes up a point, you make $100. Goes down a point, you lose $100. It's a 1-for-1 in both directions. Profit and loss. That's very typical. All right, so that was all they had in the beginning. But then this is a covered call. All you have to do is you add a sell call, boom, and now you have the covered call. All right. The covered call, which you can see by looking at the profit and loss graph, the market doesn't have to go anywhere, and you make $3,200. That just shows you're doing a trade and you have time decay in your favor. In options, there's either two scenarios. If you're buying options, you need the underlying to make a move further, in a dramatic move, and make a move further than the option is priced, so you can realize a profit. It's the opposite. When you sell an option, you're looking for the market, the underlying, to make smaller moves than expected. All right, so that's the covered call. So here's all Jay did. Watch this. All you got to do is you add what the SPYT trade is. If the market's at 51.25, they may use the 51.30 and the 51.45. They choose strikes 15 points away. They sell the nearer option. See, this option they can sell for $20. That's a call option. So whoever bought that option is betting that the market will go 20 points this way. So betting the market will go to 51.45 and beyond. That's just the break even. So when you're selling that, you're taking the opposite bet. You're saying, no, we're going to stay with inside. Even if we move up, it's not going to be that far. All right. Anyway, we sold that option for 20. Then they buy an option 15 points away. This one they could buy for 14, and that's pretty typical. Most of these days, they get about 7 points credit, sometimes 6, sometimes 8. What this does is it gives you the same thing the covered call strategy does. It gives you a head start. If the market goes nowhere, you still make money. If the market goes down a little bit, you're starting with a head start. The market has to drop a certain amount, in this case, about 10 SPX points, or 17. Well, in this case, about 5 SPX points before you lose money. And that may not seem like a lot, but it adds up. And the main thing is they get the income from this fund. But the other main thing is, compared to the covered call fund, they aren't capped. So let's do this. Here's a covered call fund where somebody sold the 50-50 call. Let's do it. Let's make it apples to apples, and we'll sell the 50-30. Okay. So here's two ways of doing it. So here's just the covered call fund. So in the covered call fund, the advantage is the covered call guy makes $2,000 if the market goes nowhere. The call spread guy just makes $600. The covered call guy has a further head start before he loses money. So, but they both have a head start, but he has a further head start. So there's a little more advantage for him. The reason there's more advantage is because his upside's totally capped. The thing is, the call spread strategy works better when you get let's say you get a day that's up 1%. Covered call makes $2,700. Call spread makes $4,200. Okay. Well, let's say you get a day that's down 1%. The SPYT method loses $4,400, right? But the JEPY, just the covered call or short put, it's the same deal. Their method on a 1% down day loses $3,200. I already forgot what this one was. I'm the worst. 3,200 to 44. Okay. So that's the thing. This one, the SPYT is even a little bit more risky on the downside. And the only reason is because instead of just selling an option and owning stock, which is what a covered call fund is, they actually sold an option, but then bought another option. So when they bought another option, the sold option is what gives them cushion. So the bought option takes away some of their cushion. So they have a little bit more risk on the downside. However, I will say this, it's less risk than just having the shares by themselves. The way that SPYT actually does it is they use SPY shares. Because I was saying in that other video, there's no such thing as SPX shares. SPX is just an index. People can create SPX shares using synthetics, but there's no shares. So what the way the fund's doing is they're buying 1,000 SPY shares. The thing about the SPX is it's a gigantic option. To sell one SPX put, it's $500,000. It's a huge option, whereas the SPY is 1/10 the size. To sell one SPY put, it costs $50,000. In any event, these guys are using SPX options, but they're using SPY shares. So what they're doing is for every 1,000 SPY shares they have, they do one call spread. And that's what they've been doing. They've been having around 17,000 SPY shares, and they've been doing 15 or 16,000 spreads. They've also been using IVV shares for the underlying, but that's basically the same thing with SPY, I believe. If I'm wrong, put it in the comments. But I think it's substantially the same thing as SPY. So yeah, all they do is they own the SPY shares, but they do a bear spread with calls on the SPX. And I just showed you this, but here's another way to think of it. Watch this. If you didn't have the stock, all right, that's all they're doing right there. That's the spread they're putting on. They're selling the 51.30 and buying the 51.45. What that does, if somebody does that spread without the stock, it's a nice trade too. It puts you in the position where if the market goes nowhere, you make $600. The market has to go up before you start losing money, 0.2%. Unlike stock, where if you short stock, as soon as the market goes up 1 cent, you lose money. You have a little bit of a head start on this. Since you're selling calls, buying calls is bullish, selling calls is bearish. So this is a bearish play. So that's the trade by itself. And a lot of people do call spreads just by themselves. Just when you think the market's gone too high, sell one of these. Even if the market goes up a little bit more, as long as it doesn't, like in this case, as long as it doesn't go past the break even, this is just for one day. And if the market goes down at all, it's a full profit, stays the same, it's a full profit, or it can even be a full profit if it goes up a little bit. In any event, it's a good trade by itself, right? Well, once you put the shares in there, which I've never thought of before, this is a great strategy. Once you put the shares in there, SPY shares pay a dividend. So they get a 1.6% dividend for owning the shares. They can sell these call spreads against them. And these call spreads are going to give them just a little bit of income every day and allow them to pay a 20% dividend. I mean, like I say, I think it's a great idea. But basically all this is a bear call spread. Okay, so on the down day, like I said, this spread's usually worth 6 or 7 points. So on a down day, you make 6 or 7 points. For those of you guys that trade SPY instead, a lot of people trade SPY. I know Mike, the tactical stock scalper, trades some SPY, I think, and IWM. But anyway, 60 or 70 points is the equivalent of 6 or 7 SPX points. Well, that's a 60 or 70 cents. That's a huge head start to start with. And yes, people could easily do the strategy themselves on a sideways day, just like any option selling strategy. You make money, and you gain ground on the index. You gain ground on the index on a down day. You only lose ground to the index on a bullish day. The max risk on these, just to show you here, let's take off the let's exclude the stock again. So the way you figure the risk is it's the width of the spread, which is 15 points, minus whatever you received, which is the credit, which is 6. So 6 minus 15. So the difference is is your risk. So you can either make 6 or lose 9 with this particular example. And so that's the way it is with SPYT on a daily basis. If the market goes down or stays the same, they make an extra 6 SPX points. If the market goes up, but not too much, they might still do all right as well. But if the market has a big up day and goes up like a more than 0.5%, they're going to be at max loss on their spread, right? Well, their spread's max loss is limited. So if they can get a big down day, then instead of going up just 0.5%, it goes up 1.5%. Then they pick up ground on SPYT picks up ground on the other strategies on JEPY, because JEPY is totally capped. Here's a JEPY strategy right there. Or actually a JEPY strategy, they sell a put, but it's the same thing. The short put right there, short call with stock. The cool thing about the put is you don't need stock. It's the same thing economically. You don't need stock, but on a call spread, a short call, they make you have stock, because otherwise your loss would be theoretically unlimited. So when you have stock, the theoretically unlimited gain you can have from your stock is offset by the theoretically unlimited loss you can have on a short call. It's a lot cleaner just to sell a put, because you only, in my opinion, the put's a genius way to do it. Problem is, like I say, it caps the upside. It's not a problem, but it's something you have to be aware of, right? So on a big up day, they'll lose whatever the risk is. In this example I was using on the slides, it was make 7 or lose 8. But I made the point, JEPY's cost is uncapped, because JEPY loses an opportunity cost, the difference between the strike they sell and whatever the market ends up at. And that can be a huge difference on some days. The thing about SPYT is the cost, the cost up front, it's whatever the risk is on the trade, and it's capped. You aren't committing yourself to a large fee. You're basically paying a fee to get the money early. There's just 2 different ways you can structure it. You can do it the way SPYT does it, or you can do it the way JEPY does it. There's other ways too. All right, so JEPY, what they're really doing also is when they sell that put that's in the money, they're making the in the money amount every day, and because that amount goes in the NAV. So in this example, what they try to do is they try to sell JEPY tries to sell puts that are 0.25% in the money, and they get about a 0.25 point premium. So they do that 5 times a day. So in an ideal month, when if the stock goes up, creeps up slowly like it's supposed to, in an ideal month, JEPY can make 5% NAV return, NAV gain. So that's about 60% a year, and 5% dividend, because that's the 0.25 point times 5. Anyway, but the problem is they're pretty much capped out at that. The JEPY is never going to have a year where they're going to make 200%, because they're just the way the way they structured this. JEPQ had a great year last year, and they made 36% or something. These funds are capped out. These short call and short put funds, cover call and short put funds, are capped out. So that's one disadvantage. Of course, you're getting some of the income early, so it's a trade-off, right? You're getting a little head start every day. The head start's the theta decay or the time decay. The main cost of these things are opportunity cost, or this never puts you in a position where you would lose more than the index. This strategy is accretive from the get-go. The second you put it on, odds are in your favor, time decay starts working, and you make more than the person that just owns the index. Same guy just buys the index as you, and instead of buying the index, you sell the put, you make more. It's immediately accretive. Same thing, or you sell a call spread on the index. It's immediately accretive. But like I say, the opportunity cost are where it gets you. So um, even though they aren't capped on the upside, when we talk about path dependency, Jackson, what are you doing? Behave. I think he's trying to get the squirrel. If you notice, when I was talking with Jay, after I got through with the small talk, when I was asking him the warm up question about his background or whatever, and I really was curious too. It wasn't just a warm up question. So I heard he had an engineering background. But anyway, um, as soon as I asked that, the very first thing I said to him was, "Congratulations on the SPYT." And I meant it because it's there. There's two problems with these funds, and it solves one of them. If we could ever get a fund that solves both of them, that'd be something else. But there's the two problems are they get a lot of downside. That's a huge problem. That's the main one. They get a ton of downside, and even though it's not as much as the underlying, even though it's true these aren't as risky as the SPY and the triple Qs and stuff, on the downside they even though they aren't as risky, they could still get a ton of downside. And so problem number two is they don't get a lot of upside. I showed you the in the money amount, and they do capture that small in the money amount, but at the most that adds up to a few. That it's never going to be a gigantic amount. They're never going to be up 1,000% in a year running a strategy like this, because your upside's capped. So that's definitely number two. You don't, and when you do get upside, it goes super slow. Great spelling there on the slow there. Sorry about that. Because of the cap features of the funds, you do get some, but it's limited or throttled. Okay, but there's a third problem. I'm kind of being facetious, and that's that the underlying can go down. That's not really a problem. That can happen to any of them. I'm not calling that a problem. In my opinion, there's no difference between Tesla and Coney. It's just Coinbase is a better underlying this year. Next year, Tesla might be a better underlying than Coinbase. In other words, I believe the market is random, and you can't do anything about that anyway. So if you buy one of these funds and your underlying drops, that's just that's the way it goes. So anyway, hopefully Tesla will be back. But so you can't solve the third problem, or I guess if you have any ideas on how to solve the third problem, let me know. But the third problem is a tough one. But as far as the first two, I had it solved, and that's why I told Jay they need to make a fund that sells put spreads that stops the unlimited loss on the downside. And he said he liked the idea all right, but I mean, the reason they did this SPYT first, though, instead of the put spread idea is because this is a better idea. He knows it. And because markets go up most of the time. So rather than worrying about the downside, why don't you try to get some extra upside? And I bet you the SPYT test out better than my method. But I was trying to solve the problem in a different way but they both solve the problem. SPYT gets you more upside. And my method, where you sell a put spread, gets you less downside. And I'm talking versus JEPY, versus the conventional covered call or short methods that are out there now. But really, yeah, the stock going down, I don't know a solution to that. I mean, well, yeah, I do. I mean, you stay diversified. You have like 20 of these, so no one or two stocks can hurt you that bad. And stay with the indexes. That's why I always talk about Defiance. I mean, Defiance, a lot of people don't like triple QY, but it's certainly done a lot better than Tesla, right? I mean, pays the same dividend, and the NAV's been a lot better. So, all right. So there are a million ways to solve this problem about the not enough upside. The first one that comes to mind is QYLG, and that's a global X fund that just does a partial cap. They do cover call, but they only sell on half the shares they have. That leaves half their portfolio unencumbered, grow as far as high and as far as it can. That's a legitimate strategy too. To just you don't have to sell covered calls on your whole portfolio. There's other funds also, Bali and some of these newer ones. I believe TUGN and a lot of these newer ones are not total overwrites. They're being strategic and tactical. But you don't have to. The other thing is you don't have to. Covered calls aren't the only show in town. You could also forget about those and just get different kinds of dividend stocks. You could just go for dividend growers. You could forget about dividends at all and just go with growth. And then when you need money later in life, sell some of your growth stocks. I mean, there's nothing saying you have to do dividends and you have to do covered calls. The reason I talk about them so much is because I like them and I know they work. And I'm just trying to help evaluate between all the different choices we have, which choices are better, and there's probably no better or worse. It's like I always say about dogs, there's no bad dogs, there's just bad owners. I don't think there's any of these funds, there's no bad funds, there's bad underlines. Tesla's a bad underline right now. Or if there was a bad fund out there that had a bad strategy that wasn't accretive or something that I didn't like, I would tell you about it. I've been pretty critical of Tressa's strategy, as you guys know, and I got a little bit of that. And Jay kind of answered some of my questions on that. But I mean, I'm not shy to talk about strategies I think are no good. I told Jay that I thought I was afraid Tress was going to bleed to death. It's not a compliment when you tell a fund manager his fund's going to bleed to death. But he explained to me why it wasn't. So anyway, I'm sure he loves people telling him about his job, telling him how to do his job. Retail traders that have a Tasty Trade account and, telling him how to do his job. I bet Jay loves that. But yeah, I'm just trying to break down the different strategies that are available for you guys. But like I say, you don't know what you don't know, right? If we knew there's a bear market coming, we'd actually prefer JEPY. And I know I'll get a lot of pushback on that. A lot of people think the JEPY is super, super risky, but it isn't. It's less risky than the SPYT. On the downside, when the market turns around and goes back up, that's where the risk is. And that's what people misunderstand. But it's important to understand where the risk comes from. But really, if we knew it was going to be a bear market, we'd just get some UVXY, right? Or what about if we knew it was going to be a bear market, just go to cash? I mean, if we really knew, we could sell puts on the way up and then we could buy puts on the way down. That'd be another great strategy. Of course, it's not that easy. You never really know. I mean, I don't really know. Remember in the 99 out of 100 economists predicted, or something, 97 out of 100 predicted a recession for us in 2023. And they were wrong. We didn't get the recession. And not only that, the NASDAQ was up 55%. Anyone that went to cash in front of that, like I say, you don't know. That's what these option strategy funds are great for, because since you don't know, you can operate in an environment where you don't know, but where you at the same time give yourself a cushion or a little bit of an edge, a buffer, so to speak. Definitely these aren't for everybody. And the most important thing is you have to understand how they work, and they're confusing and a lot of people don't. But the other thing is you can't already have a bunch of them. You see people on Twitter all the time that are all in 100% of their portfolio. I mean, it's not the way I would do it. There's probably worse things you could be all in on. I mean, there's probably not the worst thing to be all in on dividend funds, but still, these funds aren't perfect. They have things you have to be aware of. But here's the other thing. So which one should we use from now on? Should we drop JEPY and get SPYT? I just got JEPY last month. I didn't know SPYT was coming out yet. What's the answer? Or do we get JEPY? Do we forget about JEP? I mean, do we get JEPI? Do we forget about JEPY, the Defiance Fund, and do we get us some JP Morgan? Hang on, guys. Nothing wrong with JEPY. They use the monthly strategy. They're super steady. Great thing. Thing is, we don't know. It depends. We could answer those questions if we knew what the market was going to do. We knew what the market was going to do. We'd be set. For me, though, like I say, I get worried when I see people, but on Twitter that have all their money in these. But at the same time, it's American. It's your own money, and at least they don't have all their money in NFT or Dogecoin or something, although they would have done pretty well in Dogecoin. So I don't know. But I mean, these are perfect for me. These are perfect for someone in their mid 40s or even mid 50s, but let's just say mid 40s for this example, husband and wife, and he's a software engineer, makes a couple $100,000 a year. She's a nurse or school teacher or something. and or she does something, makes about 50,000 a year. They waited till longer in life to have kids, so they got their careers developed, and they're in their mid 40s. They have about $1 million. Well, they've had two kids. She wants to stay home with the kids. Okay. Well, so, if he has a standard portfolio, like a lot of millionaires do, they're going to have a 60-40 portfolio. And so, what he could do is he could talk to his planner if he has one, and and they could maybe allocate, instead of 60-40, switch it to 60% stock, 20% bonds, 20% high yield funds. That gives you 200,000 of these funds. If I was his broker, I'd get them widely diverse. I'd get him a bunch of these where even if he had Tesla, it wouldn't hurt him too bad, because he would also have some other ones that would offset it. So he could be making, I don't know, 100,000 a year, probably 80 or 100,000 a year extra income. Now, granted, yeah, there's other problems with these, but even if you allowed for, some pullback in his NAV or whatever, he could still make $50,000 additional versus what you would make in bonds. And that's enough to have mom stay home. That solves the problem. There's also people I've heard of that want to take semi-retirement or early retirement, partial retirement and stuff. There's strategies that could be used with these before. Back in the old days, there was no way that you could make, even if you needed to make 20%, or I mean, of course, everyone, but there's no way to make it, especially with this little amount of risk. I mean, there is risk, but in the old days, you would have had to have a lot more risk or have a lot more access to brokers and money managers. There's always been a way to do this, but not, you can't just you've never been able to pick up your phone and get on your Charles Schwab account and do it this easy. I mean, this is a great time to be alive. You can pick up your cell phone and you can put on a short vol strategy that can make 50% a year, in one click. I mean, just off your cell phone. You don't even have to be approved for an option account. You only have to know what an option is. Although these are better for option traders. These funds are made perfect for people that understand how they work. And that's where I'm trying to come in. I'm trying to help with the understanding. So like I was saying about the erosion, that's a little bit of it's a little bit of a red herring. Because because there's nothing we can do about the underlying going down. Some underlines go up, some underlines go down. That's not, erosion's what happens when you buy options. Erosion's a different thing, and that's why you get pushback from Jay and from me and the option traders when you call it that. But it doesn't matter what you call it, whatever you call it, when it's not fun when your NAV goes down. So think about it this way: if a fund's paying 40%, okay, they need the underlines. These funds do track the underlines, not 100%, but they track them about halfway. But just think about it this way: real simple method. The fund's going to pay you 40% of your NAV. The NAV of the underlying, the security they're trading needs to be up at least 40%, if not 80, but at least 40%, or else the NAV is going to pull back a little bit because they're paying you out of the NAV with the dividend. So it's almost like they're paying you out of future. You're almost kind of taking a loan against future NAV growth, so to speak. I've never really thought about it that way, but you have to really factor in what the underlines do, and you don't know. You really don't know. It's not a given you're going to have a problem with NAV. There's some people that own Coney, just some people own Tesla. Just don't go all in. And the NAV thing isn't a guaranteed thing. Of course, the other key is reinvesting a portion of the dividend. And the last example, the people use the money so the spouse could stay home from work, right? So they would just have to eat the paper loss in that case. But, but a lot of people who are doing these and reinvesting hang on a second. Jackson. On the erosion part, it all depends on how the underlines do. But let's just think about it this way in a real simple example. If the fund's paying 40% or whatever the fund pays, whatever percentage the fund pays, that means the asset that they are tracking needs to be up at least by that much for you not to suffer any NAV underperformance or whatever you want to call it. If you're intent on a chart that goes up and to the right, you aren't going to get it in a fund that pays 40%, unless the assets that the fund tracks are up 80% or 200% or something. In that case, like with Coney, you'll be fine. But let's just say this way: if you have a fund that pays 40% and the assets it tracks are flat on the year, right? Simple math would tell us the 40% comes out of the NAV. So by the end of the year, if the assets it tracks are flat, its NAV is going to be down 40%. I mean, it has to be because of math. But depending on what the underlines do, the thing is the erosion element is not really a thing. I mean, it doesn't have to happen. Happens to some of them and doesn't happen to others of them. Let me put it this way: it happens to all of them because everyone gets the premium paid out of the NAV. The dividend comes out of the NAV, so all of them erode. Even SCHD erodes by whatever the dividend is, or because the price comes out of the NAV. But so SCHD's underlying that it tracks. It pays a 3.6% dividend. So its underlines need to be up at least 3.6% over the next year for them not to have any problems. The thing is, people don't notice it on stocks that pay small dividends like 3, 4, 5%, because it's pretty easy for the underlines to be up that much, and you won't have to factor it in. When you're all of a sudden paying 50 or 60%, you're asking the underlying securities to be up 50 or 60% a year, which is no problem for a lot of these yield max ones. They go up way more than that. But I'm saying, but you have to be aware that's kind of what you're asking if you prioritize the NAV. But of course, the other key to the NAV thing is to kind of game the system and to reinvest 2/3 of the dividend. And so if the NAV does come down, or as the NAV comes down, you're buying at a lower price and you're lowering your cost on your yield on cost. As it comes down, you're also lowering your average cost. So you can negate, or you can strategize that situation away. But that's another key. And the last example, the people use the money so the spouse could stay home from work, so they really can't afford to reinvest 2/3. But for normal people in other circumstances, the 2/3 reinvestment, especially on JEPY, especially on the 100% cap funds, is essential. On the partial cap funds, 2/3 is no longer the rule of thumb. I don't have a new rule of thumb yet, but on the partial capped ones, it's not as bad of a problem. We'll talk about that some more in a second. So we started talking about it a little bit in the other slide, but we aren't defenseless. We can dollar cost average. So, and it doesn't have to be back into the same fund. We just can't, we can pull the money out of one fund and put it in another investment. But the thing is, you can't just take the dividends and spend it, because you're partially cannibalizing some of your investment. They're paying you back some of your capital. So if you do that, eventually you won't have any capital left. So that's what I'm saying. One of the defenses is the 2/3 method. The other defense is to pick better stocks. Because at some level you're also playing the market, even though it's smart money to sell options, and it's a smart money playing everything. You're still playing the market. There's no way to get away from that. Your outcome is going to be attached to the outcome of the securities that these covered call funds track. So another trick would be to use a longer expiration cycle. If you look at, in other words, instead of messing with the Defiance funds, look at the funds on the monthly basis. They're going to have less of these issues with the super high paying dividend coming out of the NAV. They'll have less of all those issues. And in fact, JP Morgan, JEPQ, and JEPI, they hold back a part of the profit as part of their business model. They have a really good business model. If 8 or 10 or 12% income's enough for you, JEPQ or JEPI, great stocks. Also, Bali, BALI, great stock. I'm going to make a video on some other great ones. FEPI. There's plenty of choices out there. I mean, I remember about a year ago, there was just Tesla, and that was all. The Tesla and OARC. I mean, YieldMax had 2 or 3 stocks out, and you kept hearing the Defiance was going to come out with one, but they hadn't yet. But anyway, So basically what it comes down to, though, is with the SPYT, you're making about a third of the money that you are with the JEPY. If you really need the extra income, you're trying to get a spouse home from work or something, and you really need that extra income, or you're doing something, yeah, JEPY is probably the way to go. But if you can deal with a little less income, like 20% would help you, then in my opinion, SPY-T would be a little better compromise because for one thing, I don't think you would have to re-drip. It only pays you 20%. The other one pays you 60%. You have to reinvest 40 to stay even, kind of. This one, I think you could just take it all. I haven't done any studies on it yet. You're still going to experience a little bit of decay or just what all these do. But it's not going to be severe. But really, without knowing the future, it's important to say for sure. It's basically you're saying, do I want to make $2,000 a day, which is what the short puts do, or do I want to make $700 a day, which is what the selling the call spread does? It's possible no without knowing the future. These guys, yeah, they're just paying out the extrinsic premium they earn. They don't care. The NAV's going to do what the NAV's going to do. That's, there's no free money. We all know that these covered call funds don't typically outperform the market, but they can. The ones with the monthly business model are following a benchmark that actually did outperform. There's a benchmark, I think it's 2% out of the money monthly covered calls, and it actually did outperform the market on over 27-year basis or something on a theoretical basis. A lot of funds, I think JP Morgan and a lot of in Global X are trying to recreate that benchmark or that theoretical thing. And I think JP Morgan's got the closest right now. Okay, remember the math. R equals N plus D, right? Return equals NAV plus dividend. So total return equals NAV return plus dividend yield. Okay, so let's do a little story problem. The market moves up 50% a year for the next 3 years. Let's say the high yield fund gets about half the total return. So that's very typical. So that means the high yield fund is going to be up 25% a year for the next 3 years, right? The high yield funds can be up 25% in total return. The story problem is, what is the NAV going to be up? So, unfortunately, since the fund pays a 50% dividend, algebra tells us that if R is negative 25 and D is 50, right, then N, which is NAV yield, is going to be negative 25 every year. And that's for the next 3 years, right? Well, and this isn't a great environment. Think about this. This is a fund making 25% a year. That doubles your money every 3 years. That's this fund. It's making 25% a year. At the same time, after year one, the NAV value of the fund is only 75% of the original NAV value. By year two, the NAV value of the fund is around 53%. So in year two, they would do a reverse split and put it back to 100. Then, so year three, it'd be 100. Year four, it'd be back to 75% again. In this scenario, this is if the market's up 50%, every year for the next 3 or 4 years. This is what would happen. Well, but then at year 5, they would have to split again. So in this example, they would need 2 reverse splits over a time period where they were up 25% a year. If they doubled their money in year 3, and then they almost doubled their money twice and reverse split. 2 things can be true at the same time. That's just the way these funds work. You have to be aware of it. That's just going to be the business model. When they get to under $10, they're just going to reverse split and keep doing it again. The only way one of these funds is going to go out of business is if the underlying goes out of business. Or someday down the road, if these funds fall out of favor, if maybe interest rates go back down and we go into a multiple year bull market, the covered calls won't pay that much. People will start selling these funds and they won't want them anymore. That could be another way these funds go out of business. So that's in a perfect environment. Think about that. That's in a time period where the broader market's up 50% a year. That's ridiculous. That's not realistic for that to happen 5 years in a row. Basically, we have what happened to the NASDAQ last year for the next 5 years. Okay. Well, you would still have 2 reverse splits. and still be doing great. And it's still a good investment. That's what the reverse split doesn't necessarily make it a bad investment by itself. It depends. So let's do a bad 3 years now. Let's do the reverse thing. So let's say the broader market's down 50% 3 years in a row. Like we have 2008, 2009, years in a row where the market's off half. Okay, so the high yield funds, the good news is the high yield funds lose less on the way down. So the high yield funds would only be down 25%. Okay, so that's great. We're beating the market. Hell yeah, we're beating the market. However, R equals N plus D, right? Total return equals NAV return plus dividend yield. Okay, well, R, which is total return for our fund, is negative 25%, which is great. It's better than the market's negative 50%, right? Okay, but negative 25%. Okay, well, so negative 25 equals N plus 50. So what does that make N equal? N has to be negative 75 to make the math work. So in this example, where the market drops 50%, these funds will split every year because they'll, year one, well, after year one, they would be down to 25% of its original value. Because you're losing 75% of your NAV in 1 year, well, they would split. So you'd be looking at a split every year in a situation like that. And the thing is that and this is still a better investment than the SPY, even with the split every year. It's beating the SPY by, double. Just in my example. Which one of these two funds do you guys want? You want the blue one, or do you want the orange one? It looks like what happened here, these funds were identical. They probably trade the same asset, I'm just saying. And I bet you this orange fund pays a gigantic dividend that the blue fund doesn't. But I bet you other than that, and I bet you that's why they diverged right there. Well, orange fund is JEPY, and it is beating JEPI on total return. JEPI, and JEPI is a really good fund, so this is a big deal to be beating it. Now, granted, it's over 6 months, but that shows you if you just looked at the NAV return, if you put a premium on, I do not want NAV that goes down and to the right, that's fine. There's tons of choices out there. You can choose something like JEPI, but just because of the way math works, you might be leaving money on the table. It depends. All I'm trying to illustrate with this point is this chart is not enough information to say which one you want. That was the right answer, is there's not enough information. Right answer, in my opinion. It's not just Defiance, guys. Okay, look at Cornerstone. It's a great fund. It's highly rated. Their chart, which is the orange security here, their NAV does not look great, but they have these rights offerings. And I think Cornerstone is similar to these covered call funds. It's great for people that understand how the rights offerings work and are able to take advantage of that. And I think if nothing else, the rights offering probably just keeps you disciplined in your investing, which helps you make money too. But Cornerstone's a great fund, but it does not have great NAV. I'm saying, but it has a passionate following, people that love it. I'm saying that I think Defiance is kind of in that subgenre. People that are going to buy it, knowing that the NAV, even in the best of circumstances, is going to go down 25% a year, but knowing that the dividend should outpace it. It's going to take a special subset of people. I've called it a cult before, the cult of Defiance. Cornerstone has a little bit of one too. People either love it or hate it. Same way with Defiance, and I'm cool with that. It's what's great about this. We all have our own choices to make. We don't. It's not one size fits all. This isn't Soviet Russia in the 80s or whatever. We aren't in communist China. We're Americans. This is badass, right? Go America, right? All right, guys. Not financial advice. Sorry if this video was too long. I just wanted to talk about a bunch of these issues regarding the half overwrite versus the full overwrite, regarding a partial cap versus a full cap. And I wanted to look at some of these other things regarding the NAV and stuff. And just try to add my 2 cents. I'd be interested to hear what you guys say. I always get pushback when I always get pushback when I mention that SCHD decays too. But I'm talking about decay or erosion in the philosophical sense. And all that is the dividend coming out, what it comes down to. So any fund that pays the dividend, by the sake of paying the dividend, you know, I think people, if you're calling erosion or decay a bad thing and you're using it as a pejorative term, yeah, SCHD doesn't have any of that thing. But every fund that pays a dividend has the feature of needing the assets that it tracks to go up by at least the amount of the dividend, or else it's going to lose NAV. It's just a fact of life. But it's going to lose NAV. It's like I say, it's almost like when you do a covered call strategy, they pay you. You get paid now, but they take it out of future growth. So when I first started covering these funds, I thought they were cool because I was like, you could partially annuitize your retirement, which is kind of what these funds do. They annuitize. In other words, they give you back some profit, but then also a little bit of your own money too. I mean, that's but my good friend Tom McGee made the point, and my commenter Tom made the point that financial planners will tell you that you can withdraw 4% a year. So anyway, I think if you have these funds in retirement and the decay or the NAV that you're losing adds up to less than 4% of your overall portfolio, I say go for it. They meet a lot of my goals perfect. If they don't meet your goals, you guys' goals, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to add value where I can. But I'd also be anxious to know what investments of the people that don't like these, and that's fine. What are you guys doing? What's your preferred investment? Income type investment. I'll tell you, a great investment has nothing to do with any of this. And that depends on the city you live in. But I would love to do one of these here. In fact, I might soon. But an Airbnb, you have about $500,000 in it. If you're in the right kind of city, you buy a small house and turn it into an Airbnb, or buy it to, it may take more like $1 million in Austin, but anyway, there's lots of other good income investments that have nothing to do with dividends. But Airbnbs have their own problems. You get calls in the middle of the night and they trash your, every investment that makes a profit has a problem, or can have potential problems. So to me, the being able to get on your phone and order, and start a covered call program that can make 30, 40, 50% yield, not total return, but yield a year just from your phone without even having to have an options account. That's just something that has not existed ever in my lifetime. It's a great time to be alive. Hope you guys are having a great Sunday. And I hope you like this video. But like I say, I'll read and respond to the comments, and we'll figure it out. If I said something wrong, we'll figure it out together. All right, guys. You guys have a great day.